have opened a little bit down this morning after a big surge on the last day of trading last week. Let's kick off with Omar Najia, Global Head of Derivatives of BB Energy. Omar, good morning. Somewhat of a surprise by OPEC Plus last week. What are your thoughts on the decision they made and the market reaction to date?
Morning. Yeah, I mean, it's always interesting to see what, OPEC does and whatever it is. But again, I mean, I don't try to be difficult, but I don't believe in OPEC saying something and the market reacting so much. So I think basically, if you look at WTI, you have basically, it's trading about 60 something. If we manage to break down towards 58, 85 and take that out, I think we have a little bit more correcting to do. And if we manage to take out the 62.27 to the upside, then I think basically we're off to the races again. So it's right now it's stuck in the middle. But if you look at the other indicators, if you look at the S&P, if you look at NASDAQ, if you look at the US equity markets, I really think they're about to explode higher. And if you look at Bitcoin, the best interpretation I have for it basically is that it's about to explode higher as well. And if you add oil to it, then I think that's also wanting to go higher. So I think all three of them are poised to rise. So I'm quite constructive here. I could be wrong, but I think all of them are pointing in the same direction, which is always a good sign.
Tony Quinn, operating partner at ProStar Capital, CEO of Tank Bank International. The all boats are rising certainly seems to be the narrative of some weeks, of months, if not now. Oil just can't seem to get on that boat and hold on for the ride. Tony, your thoughts on the decision by OPEC last week?
Well, I said I'm in agreement really with Omar on this. I think it's not really about, I know it makes a difference what OPEC says and does, but actually it's the markets themselves that make the difference and the strategic supply and demand balances that make the difference. And that's really what it's all about.
But that's really ultimately the point, isn't it? I mean, this is a managed supply market. So under normal circumstances, your point well taken. Under these circumstances, with 8 million barrels of oil supply on the sidelines, it makes a massive difference what OPEC Plus does, surely.
Yeah, maybe it does. I'm not seeing that here. Everyone is scrambling around in the bunker market here just to pick up all the old Hinleon stuff that's still floating around. And, there's the same sort of demand balance is happening. China is the only difference where they slowed down coming up to the festivals. They're now getting back on track again. And, you mentioned in your commentary about their travel in China, which is really the roof. Which we've also seen last week. I remember listening to your show last week, and we were talking about American Airlines boasting about being back to 2019. When now China is saying they think they're going to be 7% up on 2019 in terms of air travel. But we are talking about two very large domestic flying abilities, which if you look at poor old Singapore, unless I got in a F-15 fighter jet, there's no way I could find another airport apart from Changi. So we don't have that glorious way of being able to travel around internally as you would in Australia or China or America. So
well, you have the joy, as Mike Muller calls it, the cruises to nowhere up the Malacca Straits.
we do. They're not so popular, but I think there's a certain element of casino-driven momentum behind those.
Right. Okay.
Is what they're all about, really.
He failed to mention that part.
That's true. No, so I think what we're seeing here. I mean, I was talking with some of my good friends in the inspection industry last week. Who obviously, if you really want to know what's going on, those guys know everything. They know every movement, and it's good to hear that they are seeing volumes back to normal, but they're still finding that they're not getting long-term arrangements from people. They're not seeing people commit. People are trying to keep things as loose as possible while the market is like this.
Bora Barryman, Managing Partner, Hormuz Straits Partnership. Welcome back to the table. Bora, it's not often that oil prices rise after we increase supply. I mean, if we had asked everybody, as we did at this table a week or more ago, that if OPEC were to raise supply, the obvious answer was and is that prices would fall. On this occasion, prices are rising. This is somewhat of a counterintuitive market.
Yes, it is. And let's look at the psychology underpinning that. Perhaps it is this good news that we saw coming out of China, right? It's maintaining itself at the top position as a workshop of the world. And also, perhaps India will join China as co-workshop of the world, right? But India has been complaining. It has been complaining that there isn't enough reasonably priced supply in the market. They've been diversifying their sources of supply, going out as far afield as the United States. So perhaps this very, I would say, calibrated decision from OPEC Plus is a nod to the Indian concerns, trying to assuage Asian concerns that there could be kind of undue restrictions on the market. But then we see the news this morning that Saudi is raising their official price to Asian customers. So it's very, very interesting dynamics.
On that point, Omar, with the OSPs out of Saudi Aramco yesterday raising prices into Asia, dropping them into Europe, how do you interpret that? What does that mean, do you think, for customers in Asia's appetite for more crude?
Well, I mean, if you think about it, so we've had this OPEC meeting, OPEC Plus, and everybody's watching, what will they do and what does it mean and all this kind of stuff, right? So they increase supply and the price goes up. So either traders are irrational, or the other one is basically maybe the OPEC Plus stuff is not that important as something that you factor in and what will they do and what will they say. We all know what they're going to do. We all know what they're going to say, plus or minus. So it's already kind of, baked into the price, the expectation, the view, unless they go, off the reservation, which they've done a few times. But unless they do that, nobody really sits there and says, what will it mean and how will we react? They don't sit and watch the news and OPEC Plus said this and oh my God, and OPEC Plus said that. They watch reports in terms of what's happening to stocks. They watch, maybe news stories in general about Iran and the US and all that kind of stuff. They really, they watch what demand and supply is doing and sentiment. So I think it's kind of a little bit bigger than OPEC Plus. And I know that's not kind of a popular thing, and I know that means you can't really feel it. But I think it's much more nuanced that OPEC Plus said this and OPEC watches said that.
Yeah, but I think you're disregarding a pretty principal point. I mean, you said it yourself last week, OPEC shouldn't increase, but you're talking about a market that has 8 million barrels of idle supply. At any moment, if Saudi Arabia or others were to put that back on the market, prices would obviously crash. I mean, that's one and one is two. I mean, that's basic stuff.
No. For example, you could say the same about the Fed, right? If the Fed didn't increase, money supply and buy bonds and equities and ETFs and all the rest of it, the market would crash, right? So it's the same kind of things. Using that, the market would crash unless the Fed did this or the oil price would crash unless OPEC did this, of course. But it's in their interest to do that. It's in the interest of the Fed, unless they want to see the US economy implode, to do that. It's in the interest of the ECB, unless they want to see Europe go down the toilet, to do that. It's in the interest of OPEC to do what they're doing with the price, unless they want to all go bankrupt and belly up. So yes, but that's kind of pretty obvious, and it's not just oil; it's everything. That's the whole point.
Tony, your thoughts on that, again, on the increased OSP prices into Asia, refineries, obviously moving now into the post-maintenance period for Asian refiners, Chinese refiners, coming back to the buying, having drawn down to a great extent on inventories in recent weeks. How will these prices impact on that pretty price sensitive market?
Yeah, without repeating what Boris said, I think, is absolutely right. I mean, the Indian, there was a statement, I think, in the Times of India, I think I saw it this morning, where they were basically saying that this is their own newspaper saying basically the Indians just love to bully people around, but sometimes it doesn't work. And then this is a good example of that. They set up this, collective clout, as they called it, which was all the states were going to get together and buy oil in one big slug. And well, that didn't work. And the Saudis aren't silly, and they see that ganging up on them isn't really going to work, as we know. So I think what's happened is they've sort of lost out there, and India suffers more perhaps than most of the other Asian countries in terms of an OSP increase. You take that average 30-day across the whole of the Asian supply, and it's always going to be better for this part of the world, which has better infrastructure and can handle the volumes better than it's going to be for the Indian, certainly the eastern seaboard of the Indian coast. And it's a very difficult market for them to operate in. And with the exception of one or two of the refineries, they're not really up to speed, comparable, for instance, with the 6 that are here in Singapore. So, it's that sort of issue really that comes to a head here, in my view.
I want to make another point, just following on Tony.
Please.
Over the weekend, I believe it was the energy minister of India, might have been the environment minister, was making some noise at these Paris climate talks, saying, India needs to increase its carbon quota, and maybe Europeans and Americans should be looking at not net zero emissions, but negative emissions, because India should have the right to grow, to catch up and emit more, because it is a lesser developed economy that's on a growth trend. So again, that perhaps bolsters the story of a strong Asian demand, right? And that India will be absorbing these barrels and hence supporting the decision of OPEC plus.
Bora, just to follow. Sorry.
As Boris said earlier on as well, you mentioned the US, Bora, and that's quite right. I mean, the second biggest supplier to India is the US. It's not Africa. It's, Africans can't seem to sort of get that volume together, but now the Americans are in there. So, let's see where that goes. I don't think there's enough dominance from the American supply to sort of take over anything that Saudi's doing, but it's something we should watch. And I'd like to see what the difference is in percentage between US supply and Saudi supply. Maybe Omar knows that one. I'm not sure, but I'm not sure I can.
Into which market?
Into the India market or the South or the West Asia market, as they call it.
Right. The just on the point, Omar, aviation fuel. We have Boris Johnson due at the podium later on today announcing UK lifting of its restrictions. One of the key points that he will be addressing is whether the British will be allowed to travel overseas without consequence on quarantine in return. Sort of the first of the big European countries to lay out a plan for the summer. What are your thoughts on that vis-a-vis aviation fuel demand and those last few million barrels of that idle supply that dropped last year coming back to the market?
Yeah, so it should all come back. I mean, the reports are that he'll allow travel, or he's under pressure to allow travel after the 17th of May. You have to understand that it's all good to kind of restrict everything, but also, the UK economy is screaming, as is the European economy, as is the US economy. The East is doing great and ramping up. The rest will catch up, but you can't keep this basically in terms of no travel, no air travel forever. It's just unworkable. It's like shooting yourself in the foot. So will they allow? Yes. I was looking at the COVID cases. So the US went from like 350 at the peak, and yesterday it was like 30K.
30,000 infections a day. UK was that high?
No, that's the US. The UK went from about 60, 70, and the last number was 60, 70,000, 3,000. And that's cases, infections, not deaths.
Yeah.
Germany also has gone from like a 30K peak down to about 9. So all in all, and you're getting vaccinated, and you've had the people who have natural antibodies, and you have the people who've got antibodies because of COVID infections and all the rest of it. So the pool of infectees is, decreasing all the time. So yes, they're going to allow air travel. I think the same will happen with the US. You're coming up to the summer. The Europeans rely on holidays for a lot of their income, etc., etc. Or everybody stays shut and everybody does nothing, and you watch the economies implode. So at some point they're going to have to relax, restrictions and travel. And if you think about it, they're just following what's happened in the East. It's only a question of how quickly, right? So the destination is not in doubt, unless you think it's going to be like a fifth wave and all that kind of stuff. The destination is not in doubt. It's just a question of how quickly. If you look at the East, and you've started off that side of the world, first to get COVID, first to recover, economies humming and growing, but then you get Europe, slightly, worse off, and then you get the US, which is the worst of them all. I mean, so the destination is everybody follows China. It's just a question of time.
So the success of vaccines, just Bora, quickly in the UK, is there a strong expectation that Boris has to really open up now?
I think there's a lot of frustration, and that frustration is being vented in different ways. But at the end of the day, I think there is a bit of satisfaction in the UK as well that the infection situation is under control and that the death situation is definitely under control due to the vaccine rollout. What keeps us pent up here on this island might be just the situation in Europe, right? The European situation is worrisome. They actually almost inexplicably are having this big spike in infections. Yes, Germany is maybe not at their peak, but the direction is back up toward the peak. So let's see that acceleration of COVID come down there, and then perhaps we'll be able to visit France and Spain and the continent, which everyone in the UK wishes to do. But the Europeans have been very good at trade barriers against the UK and other countries that don't follow their rules. But we've always known that they're not that great at economic flexibility and executing important innovations and commercializing technology. And I think this lagging performance with respect to the vaccine rollout in Europe is sort of a reflection of that.
Tony, meanwhile in Asia, India is hitting peaks again above 100,000 a day yesterday, which is some near record levels. And you obviously in Singapore mentioning you cannot travel without pretty strict parameters. When do you think Asia starts loosening up and opening up these channels?
Well, it's just picking up again on something Omar said earlier on. Actually, I don't think a lot of Asia is under control. And we're seeing spikes in Malaysia, Thailand, Indonesia, I think is still a bubble that's waiting to happen. I don't think really we've got to grips with that one because there's so many diverse people across the islands that we have to find to see whether they're infected or not. Singapore is sitting in the middle of all of that. And the minute it opens one of its airlines, they're going to come in from those countries. So the government here is not going to open. Now, they've talked about bubbles. We're still sitting again on, from the beginning, 30 fatalities from the beginning, right? And we were the second epicenter. We've had 50,000 cases in total. We're having an average of one a day. And mostly they're people coming in from overseas returning residents because they're the only people that are allowed to come in. But they're not going to open these borders until they see safety around us. And you mentioned India. India's under curfew. I know, and we talked about France. I mean, France is also under curfew now. And I was talking to my friends in Marseille a couple of days ago, and it's horrendous what's going on there. But India is going to be a mess, and it's going to take a long time to sort out, again, because of the scale of the problem that they have. And until that happens, you're not going to see a Scoot or an SQ flight going to any of those places and certainly not bringing anyone for tourism into this country. And the other thing is worth adding as well, that Singapore actually, since it came out of what it called its circuit breaker, which was June last year, has just gone up and up and up. This country is a business, really. It's just carrying on, and it's doing really, really well, as Omar said earlier on. I mean, so it's almost like I walk around here, there's no real, well, there are restrictions, and everyone obeys the law here because we're a very obedient state, but country.
I mean, would it be fair to say, obviously, in other countries, that if you lock down, the economic impact can be massive, India most notably, but Singapore has managed to close, but yet keep the economic performance fairly positive?
Yeah, because I think the infrastructure enables it to do it. Country, it has fantastic infrastructure. The Jurong Island complex is just one part of that, and it has a highly educated, with the exception of me, a highly educated workforce here that really want to push the boundaries. And you sort of see the banking structures are all here. They used to be all in Switzerland a few years ago. I'm sure, Sean, your offshore account that you set up all those years ago to put your billions away, you probably already moved it from Geneva to Singapore. So
to Mr. Leong's account, and now it's minus. But it was good while it lasted. Let's go to the survey to give the room a view on all of this. One of the things that we didn't touch on, and that's perhaps for another conversation, that Boris is going to also address today, which is the vaccine passports and what's that going to do, and another layer of complication. But let's go to the outlook for, will the OPEC plus decision keep non-OPEC plus higher cost producers on the sidelines? I was thinking over the weekend, who are the winners and the losers of this OPEC agreement? And it strikes me that this decision last week, particularly the fact that it was over 3 months and not just a 1 month outlook, was in essence to try and scare away some of the momentum on bringing shale back. So I'm looking for the room's view on that. Will OPEC plus decision keep non-OPEC higher cost producers on the sidelines? Yes or no? Is it significant enough or not? Welcome the view of the room.
Yeah, I think.
Sorry, Bora, go ahead.
I'll just say something maybe controversial. No, I don't think it will keep shale on the sidelines. I definitely think that will regroup and be a long-term factor in the market.
But you, Bora, have been the one saying about the challenge of accessing capital.
Yeah, but it's not a challenge in America, is it? So that's where the shale is. So I think African producers definitely face a challenge, but in the U.S., the home of 0% interest rates, the home of free money, Pioneer is able to raise the funds to pay $7 billion for Double Point over the weekend, and on top of the 50 billion in mergers and acquisitions in the shale space last year. I think that consolidation drive will continue and create stronger shale players in the US that will probably hold their powder dry, because they're not focused right now so much on increasing production because the demand isn't there, right? But they have the capacity to do so. So they're focusing on, stripping out costs. I mean, all these announcements on this M&A is all about stripping out costs, increasing dividends, and investing in infrastructure. And they'll be ready to ramp up when the demand situation might justify it.
Omar, just another point on the digest today. Welcome your views on, we touch on, is that there's a number of geopolitical equations that are floating on the fringes. We had the big story over the weekend in Jordan, here in the region. There seems to be some fallout in the house of the Hashemites. We've got the Iranians and the US getting together on the sidelines, some kind of starting to talk this week in Europe. Any of those issues going to play a part, have something to watch out for the markets this week?
Look, the Jordanian thing is interesting, but I think it's like an internal thing. If you look at the Iran and USA, they're saying two completely different things. The USA is saying, we're going to have indirect talks and it's a great first step and whatever. And they seem, living in another reality. And the Iranians are saying, we're not going to meet you. We're not going to talk to you indirectly. All you have to do is remove all sanctions. Once we verify that, then, we come back into compliance. So, I mean, it's simple. The US wants to kind of entice Iran into kind of, we've got to talk about the bigger picture and more stuff. And Iran's answer is not nuanced at all. It's NO. So it's very simple. It's black and white. So the US, EU, the press can hope and call it whatever they want. First step, signs of a full unfreezing of whatever and all that kind of stuff. But the bottom line is simple. The US just has to come back into compliance. And when they do, so will Iran. Will Iran change its point of view? No. Has it done so in the last 40 or 50 years? Not once. Will this be the first time? Maybe, but I kind of seriously doubt it. Is the US agreement capable? I don't think so, right? They've already signed an agreement and walked away from it. What's to guarantee the Iranians that they won't do the same? So again, the theme is nobody's stupid, least of all the Iranians. And, like George Bush said, he said basically, fool me once, shame on you. And then he said, fool me twice. And he went into his, fool me twice. And he kept repeating it. Anyway.
I didn't know he could count that far, but
yeah, exactly. So you can forget about all that stuff. I mean, I would be really surprised if there's any kind of dialogue about anything. I'm not saying that the US won't just capitulate completely, but I'm telling you that, in my opinion, that's the only way you're going to have this deal come back.
Well, they're going to have to find some. They're going to have to find some creative diplomatic language to capitulate. It's inevitably the outcome will make no difference because the oil is flowing anyway. Before we give Tony the last word, let's get the survey result this morning. And will OPEC decision keep non-OPEC higher cost producers on the sidelines, i.e. shale? 2-1 in this room, at least, think that is the case. Tony, your thoughts for the coming week of where these markets may go?
Well, I'm not the best person to talk about markets because I'm not the market man. I always tell you that. I think I just wanted to. I think we've talked probably enough about oil pricing, and I think we've all had our play. One of the things I just wanted to touch on, which I was really interested because you spiked my interest in one of your headlines, which was about the aircraft carrier that went through Japanese waters. It sort of basically sailed.
Well, that's the other thing I didn't want to ask you about is the sensitivities of those things. But please go ahead.
I was quite intrigued because when you look into this, so if you think about it, everyone says, "Oh, it went into Japanese waters." No, it didn't. It went really right past the nearest, largest US base in the world, in that part of the world. And Okinawa has like 10% of its population is American and they're US, right? So that's the way it works. So that was an interesting one. But then when I found out about the aircraft carrier itself, the interesting aspect of the aircraft carrier is that actually it was originally Russian, and the Chinese bought it over 20 years ago and have spent nearly 10 years refurbishing it and refitting it and renaming it from the Riga, as it used to be called, to the Lyon. And they've learned everything there is to know about building aircraft carriers. So what are they doing now? They've got another one, the Shandong, which is still not actually sailing yet, but it's obviously tucked away somewhere in a James Bond tunnel ready to emerge with a million jets on it or something. But I was just intrigued because the story of that tanker, that ship and the aircraft carrier was an interesting one. And it sort of prevails with all the other stories you had about all the 200 ships sitting off the Philippines, making Duterte sweat a little bit at the moment as well. So that was an interesting story, and I think it's worth some of your listeners reading up on that to see that the fact that they actually converted that back into a brand new carrier and then built another one. So
that's story number 5 on the digest that Tony's referring to. It's about a Chinese aircraft carrier and supporting ships, essentially testing the reaction of their neighbors to their movements and getting intelligence from that. That's kind of that ongoing scenario in the South China Sea. Certainly interesting. I was particularly also drawn to this story on ransomware. Over half of ransomware victims pay off criminals last year. It seemed like an incredibly good return on investment if you're a ransomware criminal. My goodness. And the cheeky ones, they got half of their payments and they only gave back 15% of the content that they took. So that doesn't sound like a good deal. But anyway, the beginning of the week kicks off. We'll see where it all moves. Omar, as always, thank you very much for your insights. Great. Bora from London, thank you so much. And Tony from Singapore. You did say last time you'd be on the top of that building behind you, not sitting in front of it. That's one for the staycations. Staycations over the summer. A cocktail on top of that one, 10:30 a.m. in the morning. A little early, perhaps. Although it's afternoon where you are, so it's early sundowners. Okay. All the best, everyone. Thank you so much. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks.